Well, it sounds very encouraging. I would not have to speak at all after these statements. The power of punch, Nordic power of punch could be very big indeed. And if you look at the map, it seems that we are bigger than most countries in the world. But please remember that this is the Mercator projection of the map, which makes perhaps the Nordic countries a little bit over-dimensionally big. Important we are, however. We are supposed to discuss the role of smart power today. And this gives me a little bit of a problem, because now, not because I'm not that smart, but the fact that the smart power, or are we discussing soft power? Smart power has been defined by the gurus of cultural diplomacy like Joseph Nye and Susanne Nossel as being a kind of mixture, a combination of the hard power, that means the military power more or less, and the soft power, meaning the cultural power more or less. Well, I've been a diplomat for a long time doing things in diplomacy, not knowing really what cultural diplomacy is, or what soft power is, or what nation branding is. We simply did it. But anyway, I think when academics speak about smart power, they are basically coming from the US experience, because everybody knows that US is the leading military power, and sometimes US governments have tended to forget the soft power aspect to be added to that military power. But we could also, of course, apply smart power on big countries with also substantial military or nuclear capacity, like China, like India, Russia, of course, and perhaps some other countries. And Nordic countries would not really match that particular image, but would rather than belong to the soft power league, I suppose. Of course, in the Cold War time, Sweden was made a little bit of an effort in smart power, having both a very ambitious military strategy and also air force capacity, etc., and at the same time cultural diplomacy. But as many of you know, Swedish military power has declined substantially in the last 20 years. So perhaps today the only country in this region that could claim some smart power would be Norway, with its strong oil and gas facilities combined with cultural diplomacy. Now, we also have to take into account that there are important historic, basic differences between the Nordic countries. After all, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland are members of NATO. Sweden and Finland are not. There are discussions going on both in Sweden and Finland, but so far they are more to be characterized as non-aligned, military speaking. Furthermore, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark are in the European Union, only Finland having the euro. Norway and Iceland are outside the European Union. These are also important aspects to have in mind when discussing common Nordic positions and common Nordic role in the international organizations and in national affairs. But we have many common Nordic positions, of course. We are all culturally very internationally oriented, both in film, pop music, design, etc. That is something we have in common, and we have very many common projects abroad. I have the privilege to live in Berlin, where we, of course, also have this wonderful Nordic cooperation culturally. We have the common values. I think if we speak about European values, the way the Nordic countries handle the European values, I think is exemplary. We shouldn't be too modest about that. And we are very strong supporters to the United Nations, both financially and with good persons. We have a strong tradition in sustainability. You may know that the first United Nations Environmental Conference was held in Stockholm in 1972, and that the concept sustainability it was created in the report by Gro Harlem Brundtland from Norway in the book Our Common Future. So there is a very strong Nordic tradition and credibility in this field. I come back to that. There's a very strong emphasis on development assistance. The Nordic countries are really the champions of development assistance. It's a sad fact because it means not necessarily, we are the only ones living up to the 0.7 target, and so many other countries don't. And but it's the fact that they are the champions. There's a strong diplomatic tradition as well. And of course a tradition as international mediators. I may remind you that the first Secretary General of the United Nations was a Norwegian, Trygve Lie, and the second one was a Swede, Dag Hammarskjöld. There was a legendary Director General of WHO, Halfdan Mahler. There was a legendary international mediator, the Finn Matti Ahtisaari, and last but not least, the Nobel Prize of Peace was stated by Alfred Nobel, a Swede, and the Nobel Committee in Oslo is organizing the prize. So there's some strong tradition also in the personal field. I will give you now two little stories on personal Nordic international roles, one with a happy end, the other one with a bad end. The first story I saw a few days ago, I saw the film Diplomatie. Perhaps some of you have seen it. It's a new film, a German-French film. It's about the terrible idea, which was not only an idea, it was a project by Adolf Hitler to destroy Paris completely upon the retirement from Paris in August 1944. Everything was ready. There were bombs under 30 different bridges in Paris and in all the important buildings. So everything was ready, and the German commander of Paris had the order to do it more or less tomorrow. Then came the Swedish consul general, a man called Raoul Nordling, and in a very long talk, he succeeded in convincing the German commander von Coltsitz not to implement this order. So this discussion, this diplomatic achievement saved Paris. It's incredible, but it's true. By the way, the German commander, the actor who doing his role, is the half-Dane Niels Arestrup. So this is a story, a diplomatic story with a happy end. Now comes the one with a bad end. There was a friend of mine called, who is Hans Blix, who was foreign minister for Sweden in the late 70s, and he was then for many years head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and he became the task in 2000 to 2003 to be the United Nations Monitoring, Verification and Inspection Commission in Iraq. And the task was to consider whether there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or not. He came to the conclusion, strengthened by every week, that there were no weapons of mass destructions. But at the same time, other forces worked in another direction. And one crucial guy was Rafid Ahmed Alvan al-Janabi, called by CIA the curveball. This person had left Iraq some years before, but he had done some fabrications, some very intelligent sketches on how these weapons and the storage of these weapons of mass destruction looked like. And Bush administration chose to believe the curveball, who later on has admitted that this was a fabrication, of course. He is now under police protection. I think he's a street seller in Karlsruhe in southern Germany. Anyway, the Bush administration believed him and not our countryman Hans Blix, and that, I think, is a very sad story because it opened for the Iraq War, which in turn, of course, opened for a lot of terrorism, extremism, jihad movements, and the total chaos that we see in the Mideast region today. Anyway, we still could call the Nordics champions of soft power. In that respect, we are, of course, very far from our ancestors, the Vikings, who are perhaps not exactly soft power champions. I'll come to another aspect, and that is the European. I'm very grateful that the director of the Latvian Institute reminded us about the European values. The European values of democracy, rule of law, etc. And in that context, the Nordics have an enormous role to play. I was in the United Nations for many years representing Nordic countries. I've given hundreds of speeches on behalf of the Nordic countries, and it gives you a fantastic strength. That is correct, what my colleagues are saying. Gives you a very special position. And people envy you as well. Other regions envy the Nordic cooperation in that particular. The only thing that I might be a little bit nostalgic about is the fact that now the Nordic meetings, internal meetings, are taking place in English, generally speaking. We used to try to have the kind of Scandinavian language which covers everything. I think we three can do that. I know that. But I'm afraid many in your generation don't feel as comfortable speaking Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, etc. And on top of this, you have, of course, Finland, where the Scandinavian language part of Finland is now becoming marginalized by the year. Anyway, the role of Nordic countries, both at a European level and at international level, has an enormous potential, because we have this reputation for international openness, for our welfare state, and for our ecological consciousness, and also because we are peaceful. So hence we have a very high credibility. Cultural diplomacy, in my experience, means trying to have as good a reputation as possible, to create goodwill, to create trust. In the future, we could better use this Nordic position, both by cooperating more. We heard that there is a lack of Nordic cooperation in WHO, for instance. I hear many such stories where the Nordic countries simply, the calendar doesn't allow you for another meeting. There are so many meetings anyway, if you are a diplomat. So there is some excuse for it, but it's a pity that the Nordics don't do everything to join their forces in international organizations. But take the Russian issue, for instance. First of all, I feel, as a representative of a country not member of NATO, I feel that perhaps sometimes the debate on Russia and Ukraine and so on is too much NATO-oriented or too much NATO-biased. So it would be very healthy, I think, if we had some other aspects on the debate. I live in Berlin, so I see the attitude of Angela Merkel and Steinmeier, which are more, let's say, diplomatic in their approach to the Ukrainian. I think there is one experience that we shouldn't miss here, and that is the Finnish experience. people always spoke rather negatively about Finlandization. You know, this was the 40-year period of Finnish dependence on the Soviet Union, which should be added to the further 150 years of more or less belonging to or being at war with Russia and so on. But Finland, I would say, are the champions of understanding Moscow. And the way, the experience the Finns have could be very useful as a balance to the completely, let's say, Washington-influenced NATO attitudes to the Ukraine-Russian conflict. Another example, we are at least 3 Nordic countries have a very big Muslim population today. Very many Muslim immigrants. This is something which could be used in a very positive way. The moderate, normal, working, integrated Muslims in our societies should raise their voice against the extremists, because the extremists that are now acting in the Middle East, in the ISIS and what they all are called, they are the worst threat to our civilization in a very long time. They are absolutely terrible people, and they are, of course, abusing the name of the religion, and people of that religion in our countries should raise their voice and should be integrated in Nordic actions in that field. That is another possibility. The third point is, after all, the Nordics with some right claim that we are champions in gender equality, and there is a lot to do. Women and children are having a very tough time in very many parts of the world. The Nordic countries, with their strong credibility and tradition in gender equality, should raise their voice more. And finally, the climate issue, the energy issue, the food issue, the water issues are very dramatic issues in the future. We will need a lot of international action, and I know of no region in the world where the possibilities are as good as here in Norway to be heard or to take initiatives. My friend, the nation branding guru Simon Anholt, has said Nordics, the common denominator for Nordics is good. And good is a very good starting point, because we also then have experience, and we also have credibility, and consequently we have a responsibility, and I hope we take this.